year, and that's just, it's an incredible number. There's been one constant in the quality of the information that he is gathering and then provides for us so that we have a digital version of that, and that's in Paul. And so we're very, very happy about that. The second reason is that this whole webinar idea, you know, we're going to be doing this webinar thing, Paul's idea, right? So it's very, very good that we're moving from the 19th century into the 21st. It's great. So, all right. So our forum this year, everybody knows what the logo of the forum is, right? All right. No less, learn more, innovate, and then this particular year, discover the future. All right. So let's try that again.
Discover our future.
And you, my sir, win the prize.
Sorry.
No, you're right. I was incorrect. How about that? Of course, Ian, we don't know anything about that, right? That was not fair. I'm so sorry, but it was really fun. So let's try it again. The forum this year is
no less, learn more, innovate, discover our future.
Very good. You guys do very well. That's really great. All right. So we have the standard. We have a standard type of way of doing things. We have the keynote addresses, one of which will start with James Carlopio from Australia, and I'll be talking about him in a second, sooner rather than later, because you want to listen to him more than me. And then also we will have our keynote addresses tomorrow. We'll have a morning with Doc Hall. We'll have the afternoon with Susan, right? Right. And we have the evening with, no, the evening is actually our evening music with, remind me again?
James
Thank you, James Lee Stanley. And then we have the Sunday morning keynote. This is where my navigator comes
Glenna,
in.
Gerard, and David. Awesome.
Thank you. Very good. All right. Then we also have our parallel track presentations that are going to be occurring tomorrow during the day. And we have Marcia that's going to be doing one of them, right?
Audrey Murphy. And Greg Wicker.
Actually, it won't be Greg. It's going to be Bill. It's going to be taking Greg's place on that one.
Okay.
And then in the afternoon
is Pauline's coming back, and Steve Siegel.
and also
And
Doc is
Doc
going to be
Hall.
doing his. That's
And
right.
Tanya.
Great. All right, super. So we're really, really excited about all those things that are going to be happening tomorrow, as well as what's going to be happening today. You have on your seats, and you have picked up, if you're sitting in the seats, you picked them up, are these medals. This is the third year that we're doing this. And so this year, the medal says, staple yourself to an ideal, right? And so that phrase is a little bit different than Bob Brown, staple yourself to an order. Last year we had staple yourself to an idea. This year we've added an L. This year we've added an L because it's cheaper. We're all about the cost. But the idea, of course, with ideal is
Making sure that it's a higher service, a higher level of service. When you staple yourself to an ideal, it helps guide your way and light your way, right? And of course, in doing that, you have to have glitter, right? So we have glitter on the medal to reinforce the stars and the wonderful cosmic influence, and when you have that ideal as your guide.
So if you are able, I would like you to all stand, please, and take the medal that you have and put it around someone other than yourself.
Yes.
I would be so honored to thinking
Be careful to try so just watch it. If the play button is lit up white, that means it's stopped recording, so just be sure to press record. If it's black, I should play.
I actually
it's
didn't say
recording
you could sit down.
If it goes black, it's pushing the table. And then just watch this. If this stops playing or goes black
No,
on the
I
screen
can't
right
imagine
here.
that. So, no, Simon says we would say you can sit down, right? So, what I'd also like you to do now is find someone, and you can know them or not know them intimately, if that's fine.
Okay. If this screen, you can put the headphones on too to listen if you want. Just make sure the audio is good. If this screen goes black or just stops, just text.
And then also this year, workshop
And
that
text
we
me.
did. Know this as the resting face
Welcoming exercise.
So,
And we have some star performers here who helped us in our workshop, but we want to try this exercise with each of you because how many more people do you estimate that you're going to meet or interact with in the rest of your life? Would you say 100? Would you say thousands? Okay, so one of the things that we have discovered through our research is that many people are unaware of their resting face. And we're not gonna call it any names, it's just resting face. And sometimes people, without thinking, look what, sad, or angry, or something other than the person wants to express. So what we want to do is just give you a tiny hint of some of the training that's happening this entire pre-conference and conference now that we've entered in. And it is where you're gonna pair up with someone and you will go with each other and you're gonna help each other understand when you have a welcoming face and you start with your resting face. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? You start with your resting face.
resting face.
Okay, does that look welcoming? No. Now, some people have resting faces that are welcoming, others have to work at it a little more. And so now what we're gonna say, we're gonna let the whole crowd help me with this one. Okay, so honey, look out to them and then start. I'm gonna tell him to go and then you're gonna take turns, should only take less than a minute. And we're gonna let him know when we feel that he's got that welcoming face. Now remember, it's not just the smile, because sometimes if you have a smile but your eyes look angry, that doesn't look very welcoming to people. So we're looking at the entire facial expression and when you really sense it. So I want to hear the crowd. You get loud when you feel that he has achieved that when I say go. You ready?
Ready.
Everybody ready to watch?
Ready.
Okay, go. Yes. Kind of. The eyes are hard, right? You get the idea, right? So let's keep practicing because one of the things when we get serious about the content because of the problems that we have out there, and I'm one that Doug has to remind me constantly, is my intense face looks like almost an angry face. But I'm really passionate about the subject, right? Yes.
The face tattoo is kind of intimidating.
Out of your head from the screen. Yes, I can understand that, Yoshin. Some people have tattoos, but if you've ever been in an elevator with a biker gang, you know that you want to at least have a welcoming face. Right? Is everybody ready to pair up with someone to do this exercise? All right, ready?
Yeah, usually when We can have everyone's attention, please. I hope that you have gone through it. Please
please take a seat?
I have that. If you take a seat, then just leave here.
Yes, yes. But I have a. What did you notice about the energy of the room? What did you notice? Okay. So one of the things that we are constantly reminded of when we're giving presentations is even if you only do it for a couple minutes, it's really great to have some kind of interactive activity so people can feel good about being with each other. Now you've had a couple, we have at least a couple more. Can I hand these out right now?
Hey.
Okay, if you will pass this down, one each.
All right, so Deborah is handing out pirate coins.
I'll pick out any extras on the other side.
And the reason Deborah's handing out pirate coins, besides the fact that they were really cool when we ordered them from the place that she orders this stuff from, Oriental Trading, I think.
What do you notice for those who have a pirate coin? What do you notice on one side? Okay, so you got the skull and crossbones with the pirate, right? You got the skull and crossbones with the pirate. And the other side is what? Okay. So we have the treasure chest, and the treasure chest is to remind us what a gift we are to each other. Now, in some people, the treasure's buried, right? A little deeper than others, right? So you
Sorry,
gotta,
are you talking about me?
well, I know, dear. But it is a reminder of the gift that each of us brings to whatever situation that we're at. So it's something to always be reminded of because we can forget under stress, adversity, even the things, tough tasks that we have. It could even be pleasurable, but you forget that in the rush to focus on that, the wonderful relationships. I had someone say, work gives you a sense of accomplishment, but relationships give you joy. And so the treasures actually come from the people, not from the coinage. Now the other piece on the coinage on the other side of the treasure chest is a Jolly Roger, but it is a special skull and crossbones. So when you're part of the In2In crowd, this is the warning. And we gave it in all circumstances under positivity. But In2In people are especially positive because we want to change the world and we see the things that aren't going well, right? So in order to be positive and convey the messages that we're trying to convey, we have to be reminded that pirates only raid ships loaded with treasure. Pirates only raid ships loaded with treasure. So I was trying for years and years to figure out when I have such a welcoming face, why are people screaming at me? Right? And people who are disturbed oftentimes and have the angst within them will find a likely target and feel that they only understand the negative. They may have grown up in a home that yelling is the only way to go and they feel that's successful. They're going to get some motion, but not action. So that's what the coin is about.
Just a reminder that you have the treasure, that's why the pirates are coming towards you.
Now I wanted to, where did Bill go? Bill is disappeared.
It's
Okay.
out by the bar.
Okay. So Tim has now taken over the reins of the organization, so I had two gifts for him. We talked about,
Tim.
this is a mini volcano. And you may be observant of the iceberg metaphor of how there's things you see and can't see. Well, we've taken that to a new level that really it's not an iceberg, it is a volcano, okay? Because there's stuff going on below the surface, on the surface, under the water, above the water, at the top, and it's all exciting, but it's also the creation of life. And we had the great fortune to see it in person and walk 4 miles in and 4 miles back in order to view it. And luckily we were on a ledge that lasted longer than we were sitting on it. Because after we left it caved in. But we actually got very up close. And the second one is certainly being part of this organization. As you're well familiar, this is a surfer on top of a tsunami. And we talked about having a tsunami of negativity and dysfunction in the world, right? And so you need to be able to ride the wave, not be crushed by the wave. So there you go. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, he did. And here's Bill. So Bill, and I
Thanks,
have
Monica.
to say for Monica, yes, Bill and Monica. So where's,
So
Monica's over here.
Bill's
So,
over there.
I realize that you will continue to figure out ways to, in this new roles that you have, to continue to support In2In, but also do the things that you're doing next in life. But we just have to thank you. These are little squish hearts, right? The stress balls, right? The stress balls, because In2In can be quite stressful in the Bellows family over the time, but somehow they continue to smile and invite us and be incredibly welcoming to this entire audience. We're really part of the Bellows family, and we thank children like Allison and her brother Wilson for sharing her parents.
It's okay, you can applaud.
You can-
You want him to come forward, you're gonna bring him forward.
I'm gonna read it.
Okay. All right. I'd just like to say a few words of where we've been and where we're going. One is, we just had pre-conference, we're now in that transition stage, we're in that phase transition between the pre-conference. So if everybody that participated as a presenter in the pre-conference, if you would raise your hand, please. Yeah, I know you're all shy. All right. Good? All right. So these are the folks that agreed to, for no money whatsoever, come forward and expound on the benefits of being presenters to the rest of us, which was really great. And so, I always like the pre-conference, I have to say. It's always fun, it's kind of an informal kind of thing, yet you have folks from all different walks of life that are coming in to talk about the things that are important, and really get you set up to be ready for the weekend conference as well, which is where the big guns come in, right? So we've gone through the introductions of the folks that are going to be presenting and our keynote speakers. Again, we really appreciate them not being paid either. So it's really great that everybody
Labor
can
of
be
love.
here. It's a labor of love. That's right.
I have one more thing before you jump into the section.
Okay, great. And finally, after we're done with this, dinner's gonna be down, the stairs, not the.
Don't turn.
Don't take more than 4 stairs, all right? So if you take, when you go out here and you make a left, you don't make an immediate left, you go through the door and down the 4 stairs and into that lower landing known as the storm. Steamworks area, that's right. And so, and there will be, the table set up there and that'll be where we have dinner. After dinner, the Bellows have offered their manor for an after dark session. So by all means, feel free to come over there and, we'll trip the light fantastic while everybody's still upright. And that's also the case, I think, tomorrow night as well. And if you want to know where it is, the address is it was on the sign that's downstairs in the lobby. So make sure that you take a look at that and then put that into your GPS, which we all know is infallible. All right. You have one more thing.
Actually, I have 2.
All right.
Also on the table, we brought with us some Hawaiian chocolates. And I'm thinking of the red square game where there's a sampling of different ones on the table and you negotiate which one gets which one. But you at least should get one each, okay? And then the other thing that Pauline had done, just as a final one before we get into our speaker this evening and all the speakers as we're going to do, is Pauline had brought in this device. What's it called?
Overhead sphere.
It's the what sphere?
Overhead sphere.
Overhead sphere. And this is reminiscent, when you go from the outside world, a lot of people are kind of prickly and closed, right? Because of all the things that they're working on. And what Pauline has reminded us, and I think is a great metaphor for it, is that when we come together, we've done the pre-conference, now we're going to be going into the conference. And so hopefully you're going to continue to make connections in ways that you didn't even think were possible. And so please continue the relationships, stay in touch, and get connected while you're here. And I think you're gonna have an amazing time. We know that we have, and that's why we keep coming year in and year out. So who are the ones who've been here, this is their first time this year? Okay.
Five or less?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, 5 to 10,
Well, 6 to 10.
or 6
Oh,
to
yeah.
10? Yeah, I can't add. 6 to 10, and then more than 10. There we go. So please, all of the experiences and things, get to know each other. And if you have questions, some of the people have the Ask Me buttons on their front.
All
And
right.
that's it.
That's
And you
it.
have to check in every day. There is a place downstairs. We're thinly staffed down there, but you can check in that you have come in, and that way we can.
That way we
track.
know it's a safety deal
Yeah.
more than anything else. So, all right. At this point, are we gonna have him and a picture with James live? James, can you hear me? James!
I certainly can.
All right, James, you are in Brisbane, is that right?
Just south of Brisbane, yes.
So where? Where south of Brisbane?
It's called the Gold Coast.
All right, so I was told that you were going to have a newspaper from the local area with the date for today. You have that right now in your hands, right?
Well, that was expected, but no, since I've been on the road for the last 2 weeks, I didn't get a chance to go out this morning and get the newspaper, so you'll just have to trust me.
All right, we'll trust you on that regard. So James is actually in Australia, and he is going to be speaking to us from Australia. And of course, we're not in Australia, so that's the neat part of this, right? James is going to be speaking to us about No Less, Learn More, and Innovate. You see some of the letters that we have with commas after his name. That's not his real claim to fame as far as I'm concerned. James has co-authored a most recent Sherlock Holmes mystery called Sherlock Holmes and the July Crisis. And so that's really what I hope he talks about, though I don't think he's going to. So James started his life in Brooklyn. We've already compared notes because I have my daughter who lives in Brooklyn at the moment. But he is now in the land of the wallabies, and I don't mean the animals, right? And part of that is because we have the colors, we actually have the colors of green and gold that are on one of our, on Perry right now. And he's got an Aussie shirt in your honor, as a matter of fact.
Thank you very much.
So James has written on personal growth and development, organizational strategy, and change, and he's had some recent projects on transformational change and innovation design and implementation. So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. James Carlopio.
Good morning or good evening, everybody. For having me. The good news is it actually is morning here. It's tomorrow, and it's a beautiful day. So you can look forward to a beautiful day tomorrow. And what we're here to do in a keynote is, I guess, set you up for some things to talk about and to think about for the remainder of the conference. Maybe some controversial things to argue about over dinner. It always makes the food digest well. And within this theme of knowing less, learning more, and innovating. And I love to hear at the start about changing the world and welcoming faces. I hope I have a welcoming face. I hope you can see it well enough to see that it is a welcoming face. I love the tsunami of positivity. I think it's a great idea. And so, yeah, that's what I'd like to do for the next little while is get you to think about how important it is to be happily unsure. We're usually not very happy when we're unsure. So instead of telling you about my website and my books and all that, if you're interested in that, please go ahead and have a look. Let's get going and giving you some things to really seriously think about. So I'd like to challenge you and get you to really get a sense over the next 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that we actually as humans know a great deal less than we think we do. I'd also like to give you some evidence before your own eyes that you simply don't see the world the way it really is. In other words, your perceptions sometimes are completely wrong, and therefore, we really know less than we think we do. I see something, it looks like it's black, but then in another way I look at it, hang on, it doesn't look quite what it looked like a second ago. We also see the world the way we expect to see it. The way we're educated and trained to see it, we forget how biased we are. It's a great study that a bunch of colleagues of mine did where they looked at how people solve problems in organizations, and the single best predictor was their undergraduate degree. All the accountants thought about the problem the same way, and then they came up with the same solutions. All the psychologists, all the engineers. So we're really not good at learning and innovating. We're really good at knowing. And the last one I'd like you to get over the next half hour is to be comfortable with the fact that our views of the world, that is what we know, are sometimes simply wrong. And the psychologist in me will come out when we look at the figure ground and other illusions. Many of you have seen some of those. Hopefully they'll be good reminders if you have seen them before, or they'll be mind-blowing if you've never seen them before. And we'll also see how we misperceive and how literally our perceptions change right before. Right, everything sounding okay, and you can see everything.
Yeah, the sound is good. We were fixing the picture, and it's not so good.
We lost your
Not so good, all right. Can you see the slides and the words?
No.
I just lost it.
He's running.
They were fixing it.
He's running.
That's when we're live.
So while James is waiting for his slides to come up, let's have some questions from the audience. About anything. So for example, James, why did you write about the July crisis?
We knew you wanted to talk about that. The really interesting thing about that project for me was I wanted to do something no one had ever done on the planet. Right? In a truly absolute sense, be innovative. In the sense of do something no one has ever done. So I wanted to read a new story written by Sherlock Holmes author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I've read all those stories, as many of you have. In fact, I'm a bit of a nut about it. I've read them literally dozens of times. I've listened to the audiobooks literally 4 or 5 times, so I'm incredibly familiar with them. And I wanted a new one, but he was dead, so it wasn't very likely.
But you didn't let that stand in your way.
And I didn't let that stand in my way, exactly. So I said, how in the world can a dead person write a book? So I've got this entire body of work. I got word versions, text versions of everything Conan Doyle had ever written in a Sherlock Holmes story. And then I started cutting and pasting. Well, actually, first I read them again for another few times, and then I clustered them, and I realized there were 4 or 5 stories that were thematically linked all around the lead-up to World War I. And there were some interesting things about treaties being stolen and plans being stolen. If you're familiar with Sherlock Holmes, there's definitely a few stories, 4 or 5 stories that are very similar. So I started cutting and pasting and taking my favorite scenes from the whole canon, as they call it, and then from those thematically linked books, and literally, in Conan Doyle's words, wrote a whole new story. So the dead man wrote a whole new story, and that's how it came to be.
That's really awesome. I think we are back in slide heaven.
Very good.
The only difficulty is you're not in control of the slides. I am.
Okay.
We're on
So-
first slide you showed us. We know a great deal.
Slide number 2. All right, so slide number 3, go ahead with that one. Many of you have seen this image before, I expect.
Yes.
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 Okay, good. And so, what do you see?
A goblet.
Goblet and
Very.
Two goblets.
Very good. So, which one is right?
Both of them.
You tell me.
All right, so the question itself is stupid, right? It doesn't make sense to ask which one of those two is right. Go to the next one, please. So you'll see the animal there. What do you see? Good. Make sure everybody can see both, please.
Yes.
Now I see.
Can everybody see both?
Yes.
All right. Now, how come you don't see an alien there that's being eaten, or so a human that's being eaten by an alien? That's what one group told me last week. They said that's not a bunny, James. That's not a duck either. Actually, it's this strange alien creature, and those are two legs sticking out. Okay, fair enough. I don't quite see it that way, but they do. Go to the next one, please. All right. Have a look at all the little white circles at the intersections. And then what happens when you move your eyes around and you see the different white intersections? What happens to them?
Like flashing on them.
Become black.
They're white and then they're black.
Peripheral or black.
Exactly. So go back to the theme for the conference. What do you know? Do you know the difference between black and white? Of course you do. But you look at one of those little white things and all of a sudden you look away and they don't look quite so white anymore. And so the point so far is that there are multiple views of the world, and sometimes we simply do not see the world accurately. In a sense, our perceptions are wrong. But we don't go around thinking that. We go around thinking that I know the way the world works. I know what makes sense. And so the theme of the conference that so intrigued me is, what do we know? We act most days as if we really know what's going on. I'm looking at this series of black squares and I see a few white bits, and then all of a sudden I move my eyes around and hang on. Maybe the world is not quite as black and white as I thought. Maybe I really don't know what's the value of that. The value of that is how we begin the process of exploration and learning and eventually getting to innovate and thinking up a whole new way to write a book, or thinking up a whole new way to solve the problem of fill in the blank, whatever problems you're particularly working on. All right, go to the next one if you would, please, and you'll see. What do you see? A cube. Is that slide sideways?
Oh.
So does everybody see the cube?
Yes.
All right. You know a cube has how many dimensions?
Three.
How many dimensions does the figure that you're looking at on the screen actually have? How come you're seeing 3 dimensions when you know perfectly well there's only 2?
Imagination.
Yes, we're very imaginative.
Exactly. So we know several things, right? We know that picture in front of us has 2 dimensions. I know that. Okay, good. I know a cube has 3 dimensions. I know that. And yet when I look at this 2-dimensional cube in front of me, all of a sudden my brain says it's got 3 dimensions. Do you really know? Do we really know? Our perceptions can obviously change. Now here comes the real weird one. If you're already following along, most of you see the little blue face, and it's either popped out to the front of the cube, or it's gone to the back of the cube. The really weird thing is you should each be able to flip it. So if you see the blue face at the front, move it to the back. If you see the blue face at the back, move it to the front. Now have a little chat with your neighbors because you might need some help with this, and I'll come back again in a minute after you play with that.
A lot of commiserating.
Perfect. All right, so thank you for having a go, as they say here in Australia. Some people simply can't do it. Some people will look at that over and over again, and they will only see the blue face at the front or the back, and no matter how many times they whack themselves up the side of the head, it doesn't change. And it's like a muscle. When you want to get bigger biceps, or you want to get stronger calf muscles, or whatever it is, you go to the gym. And you take some hand weights, and you go up and down and up and down, and you exercise that bicep, and you do that 3-4 times a week for 3-4 months, and all of a sudden your 6-inch bicep goes to 8 inches, or whatever it is. But we don't actually work on our perceptual muscles. We don't work on our thinking muscles, because we get very lazy because we think we know the world the way it really is. And as you all, I'm sure, all are well aware from Tversky and Hahnemann and all the different illusions and biases that have become very popular recently, we're actually cognitive misers. That's one of their terms that they've coined. Humans are cognitive misers. In other words, we're lazy. All right, I already know how to get to work. I don't try and figure out a new way to get to work tomorrow. I go to work tomorrow the same way I go to work today, because I'm lazy and I already know the best way to go to work. I already know the right answer to this problem. I already know what my children should do. I'm working on that one right now. I've got the answer for my daughter. She just doesn't quite see it that way. Right? And we go through life being very, very sure of ourselves. And yet when you're confronted with these images, and somebody says it's a bunny, and somebody says no, it's a duck, and a third person says you're out of your mind, it's an alien eating a human. You scratch your head and you say, well, okay, right there. Or you look at a cube and your brain tells you this is a 3-dimensional object that has a blue face that's popped to the front. And then you move it to the back, and then you remind yourself, no, this is just a 2-dimensional object. What in the world is going on? So we've got these cross currents. And like I said, I loved to hear what you folks are working on, because we do need to change the world. I see it. We have very similar problems here in Australia that we face in the US. I was just in the US last month visiting my mom again. And what we're doing clearly is not working. There's too many people walking around thinking they know the answer, and not enough people going around asking some really intelligent, important, and critical questions. In fact, if you ask critical and important questions right now, you'll probably get thrown into jail. Or some version of that. And that's why you're here, because you recognize the old Einsteinian quote. You know, if you keep doing what is that, the definition of insanity that you've all heard, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Look around us, that's what we've been doing. All right, go to the next illusion if you would, and tell me what you see.
Liar. Liar.
See a face, good. What else?
Liar.
Liar, excellent. Everybody look for liar.
Angled down.
All right, and if you're lucky enough to have the oh yeah experience, the aha experience, that's what this is all about. It's basically saying, sure, I thought that this was the way the world worked. I thought this is what we should do to solve the problem of poverty. I thought this is what we should do when we implemented the new health scheme. I think this is what we should do about race relations, or about peace treaties, or about climate change. And then all of a sudden someone gives you an idea and you go, oh my God, aha, the light bulb goes on. I never thought about it that way. That's how we can create a tsunami of positivity. That's how we can change the world, by knowing less, by being less sure and being happily unsure. I'm looking for the second right answer. We never look for the second right answer. I look at this screen, I see a face, and I go, okay, good, now I'm done. And yet what we need to do is train ourselves and train our children, importantly, to say, okay, look, I see a face there. What else can I see? Oh my goodness, I never thought about that. I can look at the negative space, and I can see liar. And what else can I see? Well, I can see an alien eating a human, whatever it is. We're not trained to look for the second right answer because we're cognitive misers, we're lazy. As soon as we get one that works, we're done and we move on to the next thing and go have dinner. All right, go to the next illusion if you would please and hammer the point home. What do you see here? Good, triangle. And a few pack women or pack men that are aligned there. And the really cool thing about this slide is there simply is no triangle. It's a completely 100% white piece of paper, or virtual piece of paper. And I took 3 pack women, pack men, and I aligned them in a certain direction. And if your brain's like mine, you can actually see a line. It doesn't look a little darker there as the pack man's mouth comes in. There's no line there. It is a 100% white background, and yet your brain fools you and starts creating triangles that are not there. Go to the next one with all the little hatches, please. Does it look like all of the long lines are parallel with each other? To most people, it does not look that way, but they are. Right? Again, our brains fool us. Go to the next one, please. And what do you see? Are we up to the saxophonist?
Yes.
Right, good. And then what else do we see? Right? Start to look for the second right answer. Go to the next one and look at the elephant. Count the legs. All right, so just think about the major problems you're going to be working on over the next little while during the conference before we go to the next slide. And remember each and every one of these slides. Remember, we can't even count the legs or agree on the number of legs there. I mean, some people actually see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 legs. Some people see 7 legs. It depends on how you count them. And it's just bizarre. No wonder we can't solve world peace. We can't even count the number of legs, on the elephant on a screen in front of us. Because our brains just don't work that way. All right, if we go to the next slide, you'll see a little dot and you'll see some black haze. Take note, please, if you would, of where the larger black haze ends. But then just stare at the center darkest black dot and take 5 or 6 breaths and notice what happens to the outer edge of that haze. Start to shrink for anybody. All right. Nothing going on the slide. That's just your brain doing weird things that your brain does. All right. Go to the next one, if you would, with all the little white and black squares on all the horizontal lines. Do the horizontal lines look parallel? Does every white and black square look to be the same size and shape as every other? Clearly no, but they are. Hopefully we're starting to put a little crack in your armor of just how much you think you know. And so that you can get happily comfortable with not knowing, being happily unsure, going through life happily unsure. Sure, I used to think this is the way the world works, but I'm perfectly happy to consider other possibilities. All right, please, next slide. Very, very quickly move on to the slide after that, to the blank one. All right, have we got the blank slide up now?
Yes.
All right, how many people, raise your hands, on the previous slide read the very simple sentence, a bird in the bush? Raise your hand and count the number of people who raised their hand for me, please.
Holy cow, about 30. Out of,
All right,
out of about 40.
All right, cool. Now, when you go back, flash that slide for maybe half a second and then get off it again.
Wrong side.
All right, you show up for half a second and then move off of it, please.
Okay.
Now, ask again, how many people read A Bird in the Bush? Raise your hand.
Maybe 15.
All right, show it again for about 3 seconds and then go off of it.
That was a short 3 seconds.
All right, cool. Now, ask them to raise their hand again. Someone who still thinks it says A Bird in the Bush. Please, someone raise your hand.
Yeah, we got about 7.
All right, ask one of them if they'd be willing to come up to the screen and point to the words as they read them the next time you show them.
Perry's coming. Perry's wearing his Australian. He's coming up here in his Aussie shirt to do this.
Cool. All right, so put the slide up again. And have it point to the words and read them out loud.
Read out loud.
Too many does.
Exactly. All right, good. Thank you very much.
Well done, Perry. You humiliated the Australian soccer team.
That's right. So what's the point? Obviously, that's why Microsoft Spell Check actually does us a favor and not only checks the spelling of our words, but looks for duplicated words, because our brain does not actually see what's in front of us. It sees what it expects to see. It sees what it's trained to see. It sees what it, in a sense, wants to see. Our brains did not need the extra THE, and it didn't see it. Most groups, I've done this with groups of 400, I've done it in groups of 40. Most people, the first time they see the slide, 60, 70, 80, sometimes 90% of the people just see A Bird in the Bush. Why? Because they're cognitive misers. They're actually intelligent. In fact, the smarter you are, the better you are at just not seeing the two does, because you don't need them. And yet this is what causes tsunamis of negativity, because I'm standing here saying, it says A Bird in the Bush. You say, well, I kind of tend to disagree. I look up there and I see a bird in another bush, and instead of having a discussion about it, I strap a bomb to myself and I blow you up. It may seem I'm stringing a long bow from A Bird in the Bush to terrorism, but it's not. It's the same problem. All right, so let's go on. So pass the blank one if you would, please. And here's one that many of you may have seen. Have a read.
It's amazing.
Is that awesome?
How do you spell that awesome?
That's right. That's Orsum, O-R-R-S-U-M, right? I don't know. So once again, I love the theme of the whole conference. We go around arguing about each other whether we're spelling a word properly or not. Who cares? They're now texting using shorthand, and yet the academic in me says, oh, they've got that word misspelled. They're not doing that right. And I have to remind that little voice inside my head to shut up. Because it doesn't matter. I can read that entire paragraph, and I can get meaning from that entire paragraph, and there's only like 3 words that are spelled properly. 3 or 4 words, I think? I don't know. 5, 6. There's a handful of words that are spelled properly. The short ones like is, and can, and you. The rest are a mess. And yet you can still read it. And yet if you're like me, when you see a misspelling, you get really angry. I don't like misspellings. Why? I don't know. I should just get over it and get off of it. All right, so next slide basically is to just give us a chance to turn to our neighbors and have a 2 or 3 minute chat. Who cares? Why does this matter? How does this show up? What does this mean for the conference? How does this show up in our lives? Have a 5-minute chat with your neighbor about the application and the implications, and then I'll interrupt you in a few minutes and we will continue on. Very good. Give them a chance to talk. Why do you have a name tag that says
So now you know I started.
She's been calling me sir for 30 years.
that's about it? How many people have we got in the group? Technology. I think that's during the illusions. I've tried to get rid of that so many times myself. There's an automatic advance, and now that we're past those, I think we're safe now. I literally have it's a lady spinning, yes. It looks to me as though she would be going clockwise. Really? Still just go clockwise. Oh, that's awesome. I've never seen that. Rain is an amazing tool. You know, when I was in graduate school, getting my PhD, I was actually told that the brain is not plastic. Yeah, and it was a couple of years after that, when all of a sudden the brain plasticity stuff started happening. But until, it was only 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people were actually taught if you had a brain seizure or your brain was dead, that was it. You were smart. You see the textbook, the perception, judgment, and decision making. The brain is not plastic. Full stop. That's right. Thank goodness. Talking about what we don't know, right? What we know. Wrap them up and go to the next slide. All right, so hopefully you've had a little chance to think and a little chance to apply that. And the way this was introduced to me was the distinction between or thinking, that's the word or, and the difference between or thinking and thinking. Right? And or thinking is about knowing. Right? I know this is the answer. This is right or that is right. Can't be that two things are right. 1 + 1 is 2. It's right or it's wrong. There's black or there's white. And hopefully, as you've seen over the last 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes that way of thinking simply doesn't work. And so what some people have called that other way of thinking is and thinking. Yes, it looks like a bunny, and sometimes it looks like a duck. A gentleman just came up to show us a spinning figure. Sometimes it looks like the figure is going clockwise, and sometimes it looks like the figure is going counterclockwise. It's just an innovative and playful way of thinking. If we get off this concept of being right and wrong in what I know, and learn and play and experiment and innovate, it's and thinking. Yes, let's think about it this way, and of course we can think about it that way, and what about if we do this? It's a much more inclusive, expansive way, and that's what creates tsunamis of positivity. That's what creates innovation. I could write a book, and I can do it this way, and I can do it that way, and I can do it another way, and. That's what leads, right? And the undercurrent of the last 20 minutes has been the other two sentences. There are many ways to view most situations. There are many ways to view the world, and yet we're just not taught that. And we're sitting here confronted with amazing complexity. And what do most of us do? We dig in our heels because we know what the answer is, we know what the problem is, and unfortunately that's not working out particularly well for us. So what we need to look for are multiple perspectives, because that is what is essential to deal with an amazingly complex world. We need to be able to learn and to play and to experiment and to fail forward and to innovate. Right? And so hopefully that's what we'll play around with for the next couple of sessions. So next slide, please. This is what I rail against. This is my life's work. Right? It's really about teaching people to look for the second right answer, to deliberately look for alternative views. Because to me, that's how we innovate. And we rarely, if ever, are taught this. And it doesn't come naturally. In fact, we are enthusiastically, as I have on the slide, taught the opposite. Right, now I'm going to be a little bit confrontational here, just because it's an excellent example. I don't want to offend anybody, but I do want to challenge you. Right? Just look at how we're taught about religion. When I was taught about religion, I was not taught this is one way to view religion. Religion is really helpful. It helps people deal with the fact that we're all going to die someday. And there's a bunch of different people who think about that differently, because we're all scared about dying someday. So we all have religions. Some of us solve the problem of dealing with the fact that we're going to die someday by looking at religion this way. Some of us deal with the fact that we're going to die someday by looking at religion another way. In fact, there are scores of religion on the planet, and you know what? They're all cool. Go and hug each other. That's not the way we're taught, right? We're taught, I've got the right way to look at the world. Your way is wrong. I'm going to slap a bomb on it. I'm going to blow you up because you know what? You don't see the world the way I do. So it's a little bit confrontational. I got that. But the point, hopefully you can see it, is there's no one right way to eat. When I got to Australia, they used the fork and knife in an amazing way compared to the way Americans do. I was taught the right way to eat by my mother so that I didn't look like an idiot when I sat down with other Americans. I have the fork in my left hand and the knife in my right hand, and I cut it down, then I put it down, and I pick up the fork with my right hand and I eat it. Australians don't do that. They keep the fork in the right hand and they turn it upside down. And then they cut the stuff and they shovel it onto the back of the fork. And then they stick it in their mouths. So do they eat wrong? Well, my mother-in-law thinks so. But, because she's Australian. So she looks at me and she thinks I eat like a barbarian. Whereas my mother looks at my wife and says, how can you do that? How come the food doesn't fall off the fork? So, and that's a more light-hearted example, because I know religion upsets a lot of people. So if you don't like that example, just think about the Australian eating example. Do the Australians eat wrong because they have the fork in their right hand and it's upside down? Well, I'm telling you, you come to Australia and none of them think they eat wrong. They were taught a different way to solve the problem of how to shovel food into their mouths. And if we look at all the problems in our world as people just trying to solve the problem X, rather than I have it right, then we'll actually know less, learn more, innovate, and be able to discover our future, which is what 50 of us are in this room and in this conversation about. All right, next slide, if you would, please. This is how bad it is. This is a real slide from a real aptitude test that real children in real schools take. Select from the 5 figures below the one that is different from the others. What's the right answer, ladies and gentlemen?
E.
All right, exactly. On the test, the right answer is E. But have you ever heard of a stupider question? Right? Now, if people hadn't been in the room with us for the last 30 minutes and you showed them that, they would not see any problem with the question. About 70 or 80% of people who see that, without doing what we've just done for the last 30 minutes, pick E. The other 20 or 30% pick C, and a very, very small percentage of people pick A, B, or D. Now, after doing what we've been doing for the last 30 minutes, you all realize, as I do, that is the dumbest question you've ever seen in your life, right? Because they're all different from each other. And yet, in the context of a 6-year-old in grade 1, they see nothing unusual with that question because we're brainwashed to not see anything wrong. What that question should say is, look at the 5 figures below and tell me in how many different ways they are different from each other, and who cares? Why might that actually matter? That's not what we teach people. And that's why we don't have a tsunami of positivity, because we're arguing about the fact that, no, E is the right answer because it's 3-dimensional. And somebody else says, no, C is the right answer because it's the one that's got a bite taken out of it. And somebody else says, what the hell are you talking about? You're all morons. A is the right answer because it's the only one that has no corners. And we're all right. There's an argument for why every single one of those is different from every single one of those. And yet, because of our brainwashing from in vitro or even before that, we don't actually see anything wrong with that question. All right, next slide is how it shows up when I work with engineers, really good engineers. All right, good, we're going to build a house. How long does it take a person to build a house? Well, it takes one person 12 days to build a house. So I'm a good engineer. I get my calculator out and I say, if it takes one person 12 days to build a house, if you give me 12 people, I can build you a house in a day. And somebody else says, well, that's really cool, but I actually want to do it faster than that. So if 12 people can build me a house in one day, if I multiply 12 times 24, if you give me 228 people, I can build you a house in an hour. Somebody else says, well, that's really cool. I actually want to build a house even faster than that. So multiply 228 people per hour times 24 hours. If you give me 17,280 people, you can build me a house in a minute. Go. All right, so here's the problem. There's nothing wrong with the math. All right? If you do the math, as I just did, you will see 12 is to 1 is 1 is to 12, and 228 times 12 is, when you do the math, there's nothing wrong with the numbers, and yet you can see how stupid the slide is. Next, please. Here's how it shows up when I do strategy consulting. They come to me with a strategy problem. So we go out and we collect some data. Oh no, James, this is a really big strategy problem. So what should I do? Well, go collect shitloads of data. That'll solve your problem. Right? And if you're in the world that I'm in, you'll notice, what are all the big consultancies working on right now? Big data. That's it. Go to McKinsey's, go to Boston Consulting Group, go to the Bainey's, go to whatever, go to any single one of them. Their biggest business right now is big data. Because, shit, well, if 4 pieces of data are good, 4,000 pieces of data must be better. And unfortunately, most people don't know what to do with the 4 pieces of data they already have. So giving them 4,000 isn't really going to solve the problem. That's why you're here at this conference, because you get this. All right, next slide. Because you know, as I do, we're in a world of constant change. We're in a world of staggering complexity. There is simply too much for any one human being to know anymore. So how can you possibly know? Just get over it. I'm happy. I don't know everything, and I don't need to know everything. Because of the interaction and speed of events, we have a world of decreased predictability and decreased control, and most of us spend most of our days fighting against it instead of being blissfully and happily unsure. And to go back to the top of the slide, most of us are coming from a world of prescription. You have this medical condition, take this pill and it will fix it. Even our doctors are moving away from that right now. Well, you know what? I might be able to pull out the top third of your lung, but you know what? If you quit smoking and eat right, I won't have to do that. All right, next slide. So I don't know how this next one's going to work. Does the number 1,000 show up there?
No.
Click again if you would.
Yeah.
Look harder.
Look smarter.
Nothing showing up?
No.
All right, well, let's see if you can get to the next slide. What's the next slide that shows up? Wasn't sure.
Oh, maybe the animation's not working.
All right, so you've got just a single number, 1,000 in an orange box.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, cool. Now, everybody, what Sir is going to do now is relatively quickly advance the slides. And each time he advances a slide, another number is going to come up. So do it about every second. And just mentally to yourself, add up those numbers as we go through from top to bottom, if you would please. Begin anytime it suits you.
Okay. We got to the end.
All right, ask the people in the room what the sum is and see how many different figures you get.
What's the sum?
7,100.
How many different answers do we have?
9,020.
9,000.
7,120.
7,120.
All right, the right answer is 7,120. How come all these intelligent people gave you 9,000?
They're not good at arithmetic. They don't have enough fingers.
What's happened once again is because we're cognitive misers, as you're going down, you just simply made a carrying error. And that's what most normal people do. You go down and you add all those numbers, and then when you get to the 100 and you have to carry the one, you put it in the wrong column. And you wind up with 9,000 instead of 7,100. Once again, no less. Right? Learn more in order to innovate. This is what happens to the human brain. It simply doesn't see the way the world works. We add up a column of numbers, and I said, I just added the numbers. It's 9,000 something. What if you're telling me it's 7,000 something? Can we actually get into fights about this? All right, next. Please, thank you for playing along, everybody. So what are we talking about? Well, we're basically talking about the power of thinking. Right? In many cases, there is no simple one right and everything else wrong. And yet what we do is spend most of our time, resources, energy, effort on I am right and you are wrong. Actually, that's a wonderful book that was written ages ago by the famous Edward de Bono. The book changed my life. He's just, a lot of people poo-poo de Bono. That book is awesome. Simply called I am right, you are wrong. And the point of this, and I suspect the whole point of the whole conference, is that last sentence. If we can deliberately look at our problems, if we can deliberately look at the situations that we're facing right now from various points of view, deliberately looking for multiple perspectives, finding what looks like the first right answer and saying, that's cool, let's park that, let's look for the second right answer. Okay, that's cool, now let's turn it on its head. Wow, that's really bizarre. Now let's turn it inside out. Let's look for the fifth right answer. Okay, now let's go and leave it alone for a day, come back tomorrow, and see if we see it differently, we can come up with another 12 answers. That's how we get a tsunami of positivity, and we actually can solve and discover our future instead of blowing each other up. All right, next slide, please. Thank you so much for your help with the slides. Because we are cognitive misers. Our brains were overly endowed with processing capacity. That's why you go 1,000, 2,000, 1,020, 1,040, 1,060, and then when you get to the carrying, you just make a little carrying error because we're really quick. Many of you may have come across that wonderful book, Fast Thinking and Slow Thinking. It's the same kind of concept. Our brains are so quick, we actually trip ourselves up. But unfortunately, the problems that we're facing are paradoxical. They're nonlinear. They're truly complex adaptive systems. The level of complexity is so high that chaos theory reigns, not logic. And therefore, we have to teach ourselves how to be creative and how to be innovative, and that's why I love what you're doing here at this conference, because that's what it's all about. When I'm confronted with a problem that looks simple in my consultancy, in my strategy practice, in my interpersonal practice, I basically have trained myself to park it. Say, okay, that's cool, that's great. Now look at it from their perspective. Now look at it from another perspective. That's what enables me to solve problems with people and to help me help them. And hopefully that's what you'll get over the next few sessions at this conference. All right, we're coming to the end. Last couple of slides. So the takeaways, no one can have the one and only right answer, or very, very rarely. There's simply too many valid possibilities. Right? Everybody knows what it's going to be hard to do this without a whiteboard or without being there. Let me see if I can give you an example. If we try and look at how many different ways 9 numbers can combine, right? It's 9 factorial. It's 350-odd thousand ways to combine 9 numbers. And if we go to just 12 numbers, all of a sudden there's 500 million different permutations and combinations of 12 bits of information. Right? So with 9 bits of information, there's 350,000 ways to arrange them. With just 12 bits, we just added 3 more bits of information. We've gone from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12. 12 bits of information when you do the permutation and combination calculations, it's almost 500 million arrangements. Right? That's this explosion. At some point, our problems just become unwieldy. Right? I can handle 100 permutations. I can handle 1,000 permutations. Maybe with a good computer, I can handle 350,000 combinations. 500 million is just beyond me. And that's what we're trying to do. We're looking at problems and we're trying to say, okay, I'm looking out at the world. I'm looking at our healthcare systems. I'm looking at our international relations systems. And I'm combining millions of bits of information. And I have the right answer. How good am I? Humans can be a little bit arrogant. And that's why I like to think about us being happily unsure. Get over knowing, that is, know less, and get on to learning, get on to innovating, get on to playing. All right? So next one, please, I think. All right, last couple of reminders. The brain does not actually think, as we've seen. When you start adding the numbers, when you look at the bunny and you look at the duck, we actually, because we're cognitive misers, all we do is store patterns of past experience and roll them out again into the future. And when they don't work, we just do it harder. It's why when, I notice this in Australia all the time, we get lots of Asian tourists here. And an Asian tourist goes up to the Australian, and the Australian realizes that the Asian can't understand what they're saying because they have a strong Aussie accent, so they just speak more loudly.
Yes.
And I'm sure we do the same thing in America to tourists, as if the Asian or the Italian or whatever, because they don't understand English, so I'll just yell at them and now they'll magically understand. Well, that's what humans do, right? When what I'm doing isn't working, what we notice as psychologists, when humans find something that's not working, they just push harder. Because we go back and rely on what we know and what we should do, and what the beauty of your conference theme is, when what you're trying isn't working, what should you do? Learn, play, experiment, innovate, turn it on its head, look for the 12th right answer. That's how we'll break through a tsunami of positivity. Rather than just reacting to patterns, repeating the same old patterns. It's just amazing. All right, next one, please. So to just sum it up, we actually, as humans, look at the history of human beings. Back from when we thought the earth was flat, through to the insanity that's going on in the world today. Humans actually find it easier to kill each other than to change their minds. Right? We threw people out of buildings in the year 1300 because they said the world was round and the earth was not the center of the world, and you were branded a heretic and they threw you out of a building. today we're doing exactly the same thing. We haven't learned a hell of a lot. We find it easier than altering our patterning, our habits, our conditioning, our beliefs. We would rather shoot each other in the head than have it be okay that I don't know the world the way it really is. And you might have another perspective that's perfectly reasonable. All right, so the challenge, last 2 slides. I'm with you there in spirit. No less. Be happily unsure. All right? It's all about learning and innovating. Ask questions. Seek alternative views. Be skeptical. Look for the second, the third, the 25th right answer. Don't be lazy and stop after the first one. Question everything you think you know. Be in discovery mode. Fail forward. Trial and learning, play, do, experiment. You're hopefully right there with me, catching on. That's what the next couple of days and for the rest of your life. All right, so last slide from me, I think, is keep this, please, my request, in the back of your mind for the rest of the conference and the rest of your life. How can we continually know less and learn more so that we will be effective? We will be better fathers, better mothers, better husbands, better wives, better parents, better leaders, communicators, strategists, better neighbors, better doctors, lawyers, accountants, innovators. It doesn't matter. If you are humble and you are okay with the fact that you don't know everything and that you don't know what you don't know. Therefore, you'll learn, you'll play, you'll be creative, you'll innovate, and you'll actually have a lot of fun along the way. Thank you so much for listening to my ramblings.
You up for some questions, James?
If I can answer them, I will certainly take a crack at it.
Well, at least one right answer.
Yeah.
Exactly. You picked up on that beautifully. Thank you.
So, James is willing to take questions. This is the microphone. Please ask the question loudly. I don't want to try to carry this around and hit people with it.
Thank you.
Questions for James?
Deb has a question. She's gonna get close to the mic, maybe? Well, she walked by the mic to go to here.
She's going to innovate.
Can you hear me, James?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. I just want you to give your take on something that I've been studying. One is sensing what is important, right? Using all of your full body thinking. We are able to grasp patterns, and
Right.
like a deck of cards, that's kind of how I approach life, is like, how many different ways can I combine the deck of cards? You know, I see one thing and then I say, well, really, what's the order? Because there's so many ways that concepts relate, hierarchical, chronological, all kinds of ways. And then just taking a look and saying, okay, sensing what is most important in that process, as you are actually, you have to use patterns in some way, otherwise it's total chaos. But I'd just like to have your comments on thoughts of that.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And so, yeah, pattern recognition. Humans are awesome pattern recognizers, and we don't even know how good we are. You haven't seen somebody's face in 20 years, and that pattern of features is unfamiliar to you in one sense, and you look at them, and then all of a sudden, the underlying pattern, oh my God, that's Julie from kindergarten, right? So it's actually part of our survival mechanisms, and you're absolutely right. We do this in strategy all the time, right? We look for, here, all right, let me go back a second. This is what's so beautiful about what you said. The way people get it wrong in strategy is they look at the world, they look for the right answer, the one pattern, and then they bet their whole company on it. What they should do is what you just suggested, because that's totally consistent with what I'm doing. They should look out at the world and look at many different patterns, all the different permutations and combinations, and then they have to look at the most likely, and then they will have to make a strategic decision. Got it, and pick one. But if they just go with the first one, they're much more likely to be wrong than if they go through the process you suggested, which is look for patterns, look for more patterns, look for even more patterns, get lots and lots of patterns on the table. Then you've got a good set to draw from. Now you can look at what are the most likely patterns, and then you can place your strategic bet, rather than just taking the first one and saying, okay, good, now I'm done. So that's how I think about what I said related to what you said, and it's absolutely perfect. And what most people do is that lazy version. First answer wins. And what we know about decision making, it's actually my latest book is on decision making, is what people tend to do is they're really good at picking from the best from the available alternatives. So let me say that again. Human beings as decision makers are really good at taking the best option from the available options that they see. The problem is they don't often have all the good options on the table in the first place. And so that's what you said, and we said, let's get lots of options so that you have really good options to choose from. Then your natural pattern recognition mechanisms using your body and the mind that's in your heart and the thinking that's in your stomach and all of that together, holistic, you will know what the best answer is.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough to implement an idea you haven't thought of.
Exactly. It sounds stupid when you say it that way, but that's exactly what we're doing, right? We're picking the first answer, and then we're saying, oh, whoops, we didn't think about these other 27 things. Well, there you go. That's your problem.
Thank you.
Good question.
Jim
Thank
says
you.
thank you.
Yes, I got one quickie.
Phil, no. Phil, stand here.
Oh.
You can- disconnect.
Oh.
All right.
Are you
There's
still
a
there?
camera there, but are you there?
Yep, still good there, Phil. Thank you.
Yeah,
I can hear you.
no, I haven't got a question, it's more of an affirmation. We had Dr. Ed Chapman from San Diego speak to us at this conference about 5 years ago. And he's
Okay.
a vision expert, and he's also an expert witness to talk to juries about why you can't believe eyewitnesses and crimes. And
Yep.
his bottom line essentially was that what you see is what you thought before you looked.
Exactly.
It just fits so well with what you've been saying. I appreciate so much what you said.
No, thank you. That's beautiful. What you see is what you thought before you look. Absolutely brilliant.
Anybody else?
Sounds like it's dinner time, sir.
Yes. James, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, James,
Good night, everybody.
we wish you a good breakfast or lunch, and we wish you were here to have dinner with us. And so thanks so much, James. Believe me, everybody was here paying attention and trying to learn more and know less, because we certainly, for me, I didn't know a lot of what you were doing, so that was very good. So thanks so
Thank you.
much.
And despite it's the only presentation we had, it's probably the best one that could have kicked off the conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Very happy. Thank you for all the kind words, and enjoy and be well and get the tsunami of positivity going.
All right, very good, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being just such an attentive audience. Again, restrooms right across the way, one for male, one for female. And then when you take, there's lots of comments we can make, but we'll just avoid them. You go through the door, you take a left, you go through the other door, it may be open, we'll try and make sure it is. You go down into the landing. I don't believe, do we have assigned seating? I don't think so, right? No assigned seating, so.